So I want you to just picture this scenario for a second. It is 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, man. Never a good time to be awake working.
Right. You are sitting at your kitchen table, and you're illuminated by literally nothing but the harsh blue glare of your laptop screen.
I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah, and you're staring at this spreadsheet. Maybe it's for a community outreach program or, a nonprofit initiative or like a church volunteer schedule. And you are just deeply, profoundly exhausted.
Like bone-deep weary.
Exactly. Not the kind of tired that a solid 8 hours of sleep can fix. It's a soul-weary depletion. Because, you got into this because you wanted to make a difference, right? You cared about people. You felt called to serve.
Yeah, there was a real passion there originally.
But right now, in the quiet of the night, it feels like you are single-handedly keeping the entire universe from collapsing. Like, if you drop this ball, the world suffers. And the wild thing is, we usually treat this specific kind of burnout like it's just a math problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's the standard modern diagnosis. We look at it and say, well, the equation is unbalanced. Your output is just exceeding your input.
Right. And so the prescribed solution is always some clinical life hack, like you need to establish fiber boundaries.
Or download a better time management app.
Yes. Or practice more self-care or delegate. We basically treat the human spirit like a smartphone battery that's flashing red in the corner of the screen.
Just plug it into the wall for an hour, recharge, and then, get right back to the grind.
Exactly. But what if that entirely misses the point?
Well, it assumes the framework you're operating within is already correct, and you just need to execute it more efficiently.
Right. What if the crushing weight that so many people feel when they're trying to do good work in the world, what if it isn't a math problem at all? What if it's actually a paradigm problem?
That is the big question.
And the source text we are unpacking today suggests something incredibly profound about this. It asks a question that completely flips the script on how we view our purpose. Instead of asking the typical things like, how do we do mission better? Or how do we serve our community more efficiently?
This text asks, whose mission are you actually joining?
Yeah, whose mission are you joining?
And that question, it changes the entire gravitational pull of the conversation. It's a total reorientation of origin and ownership.
Which is exactly what we're going to explore today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really comprehensive, incredibly dense, and just fascinating document simply titled 005 Theology of Mission.pdf.
It is a phenomenal piece of work.
It really is. And this text takes a massive, sweeping view of the entire biblical narrative. It argues that mission is not some modern programmatic add-on.
No, not at all.
It's not, a strategy invented by some panicked church committee in a boardroom because they realized attendance was dipping and they needed a new marketing campaign.
Right, like a rebrand.
Exactly. According to this text, mission is the very heartbeat of God, running as this continuous thread from the opening pages of Genesis all the way to the final cosmic visions of Revelation.
Yeah, the author is making this really bold argument that before there was a church, before there was a nonprofit sector, before any concept of a sending model or a strategic outreach plan, there was a God who was already in motion toward the world.
The initiative is entirely his.
Entirely.
So for you, the listener, whether you're a seasoned leader who is feeling the absolute weight of the world on your shoulders right now, or maybe you're just a curious learner trying to understand the overarching narrative architecture of the Bible.
Or honestly, just someone who feels completely overwhelmed by the pressure of religious or moral obligations.
Right, yes. The mission of this deep dive is to unpack this foundational concept. We are going to trace what the text calls the Missio Dei.
The mission of God.
The mission of God. We're going to follow this golden thread through history to discover how seeing mission as God's initiative actually liberates us from that crushing 2 a.m. midnight anxiety.
It really is the cure.
It cures our tendency towards spiritual consumerism, and it gives incredibly deep, resonant meaning to our ordinary everyday lives. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. So the text immediately forces us to confront our core assumptions, right? About where this impulse to reach out, to heal, to reconcile, where it actually comes from.
Okay.
And the foundational argument here rests on that Latin phrase you just mentioned, Missio Dei.
Missio Dei.
Right. Mission did not begin with human ingenuity. It didn't start with the urgency of modern humanitarian campaigns. It began deep in the eternal character of God. The text states this brilliant paradox, which I love. It says, the church doesn't create mission, the church is created by mission.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I'm tracking with the mechanics of that. The church is created by mission.
Yeah.
That almost sounds like a riddle. Are we saying that without a mission, the community of faith literally has no reason to exist?
That is the exact implication.
Wow.
Yeah. And to understand this, the text dives straight into the concept of the Trinity.
Okay, which I know can sound like high-level, dusty academic theology to a lot of people.
Totally. But it is actually the practical blueprint for how witness works in the real world.
Walk me through that.
So the architecture of mission is Trinitarian. You have God the Father, who's inherently a sending Father. The Father sends the Son into the world.
Okay, right.
And the Son doesn't arrive with his own independent rogue agenda. He comes in obedient, self-giving love. And then the Father and the Son send the Holy Spirit to empower and propel the sent people of God.
So that's all about movement.
Exactly. The divine nature isn't static. It is an active, outward-moving community of love.
Okay, I'm trying to visualize this. Because if the divine nature is an outward-moving community, it means mission isn't just something God does on a weekend.
No, it is who God is.
It is who God is. That's a huge shift.
Precisely. Because think about it. If you conceive of God as a solitary, isolated monad, just a single entity existing all alone in eternity,
Yeah.
then love and mission only begin after he creates the universe.
Oh, I see. Because he needs the universe in order to have something to actually reach out to.
Right. But a Trinitarian God, Father, Son, and Spirit has been experiencing dynamic, outward-flowing love for all eternity.
Yeah.
That love naturally bubbles over and it spills outward.
Wow, okay.
And the mission of the church, as the text points out, using Jesus' own words in the Gospel of John, is, "As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you." It's patterned directly after this divine overflow.
So the distinction of ownership changes absolutely everything about how we operate.
Everything.
Because I've been trying to put an image to the traditional view of mission, the one that leads to that 2 a.m. spreadsheet burnout we talked about earlier.
Right, the exhaustion model.
Yeah. It feels a lot like running on a manual treadmill. Have you ever been on one of those?
Oh, yeah, they're brutal.
They're awful. You are the one providing all the mechanical power. The belt only moves if your legs are physically pushing it. It's exhausting. It is powered entirely by your own limited energy, your own fundraising budgets, your own sheer willpower.
And the terrifying part of that treadmill mindset is that if you stop running, the whole machine just stops.
Exactly. It all grinds to a halt.
And if you are running a community or a ministry or an organization with that underlying mental model, the anxiety is inescapable.
Yeah.
You view yourself as the primary engine of redemption.
Which is terrifying.
It is.
But the Missio Dei, this idea that the mission originates in the Trinity and belongs fundamentally to God, is not a treadmill at all.
No, it's not.
The analogy I'm getting from the text is that it's like stepping into a massive, fast-moving river.
I love that image.
Right. You aren't creating the current. The current has been roaring since the beginning of time. You are simply invited to step into it, to join a powerful hydrodynamic force that is already in motion.
Yeah.
I mean, you still have to swim, right? You still have to navigate the rocks. That still requires effort. But you are not generating the propulsion. The river is carrying you.
The river metaphor captures the theological reality perfectly. It removes the illusion of control. And the text describes this reality using two very specific words: humbling and liberating.
Humbling and liberating. Okay, let's break those down.
Well, it is deeply humbling because you have to admit you are not the owner of the franchise, right?
Yeah, you're not the CEO.
Exactly. You are a participant.
Yeah.
You don't get to dictate the terms, the timeline, or the ultimate strategy. But it is profoundly liberating because the outcome does not rest on your frail shoulders.
That is such a relief.
You aren't left to invent purpose from scratch or sustain it by your own brilliance. The mission is anchored in the infinite faithfulness of God, not the fragility of human enthusiasm.
So to ask the practical question for you listener right now, how does this alleviate the pressure to save the world?
Well, it alleviates it because the world already has a savior, and you are not him.
Right. You were just asked to be faithful in your specific, tiny stretch of the river.
Exactly. And if this river of mission is indeed God's eternal initiative, if he is the one driving this current forward, we cannot just look at the modern era to understand it.
No, we have to go way back.
We have to trace it upstream to the very beginning. We need to see where this grand strategy was first unveiled in human history.
Which takes us to the book of Genesis. But the text doesn't start with a peaceful garden. It focuses heavily on a massive, catastrophic event early in the biblical narrative.
Yes, it draws a massive contrast
It
here.
contrasts the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11 with the calling of Abraham in Genesis 12. And I want to camp out here for a minute because Babel is fascinating. What is the actual sociology of what is happening at Babel?
Okay, so the text views Genesis chapters 1 through 11 as the essential theological prologue to the mission. At Babel, you have the ultimate crystallized picture of human self-exaltation. Humanity gathers on the plains of Shinar and initiates this massive architectural and sociological project. And their stated goal in the text is incredibly revealing. Let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.
Let us make a name for ourselves. It honestly sounds like an ancient corporate branding exercise.
It really does.
But what is the underlying psychology there? Why are they so terrified of being dispersed?
Well, in the ancient Near Eastern context, building a ziggurat, which is likely what the Tower of Babel was, wasn't just about reaching a high altitude for the view.
Right.
A ziggurat was fundamentally a staircase for the gods to come down to earth. So the psychological mechanism at play was control. The people believed that if they built the ultimate religious center, they could feed the gods, manipulate the gods, and thereby secure their own significance, power, and safety.
Wow. Okay, so it's an empire of human achievement attempting to literally storm heaven.
Yes, they are trying to secure an eternal legacy entirely apart from dependence on the Creator.
It is the ultimate human treadmill. They are trying to build an engine of self-salvation. And how does God respond to this massive, unified hubris?
He confuses their language. And the text notes the profound irony here. Their attempt to centralize power results in utter fragmentation. The unified empire fractures.
Everything falls apart.
Humanity is scattered across the face of the earth, divided by language, geography, and tribal hostility. Babel is essentially the origin point of ethnic and cultural division.
So humanity is scattered, confused, and deeply fractured. The world is a broken mosaic. And in direct response to this global catastrophe, God makes his move in Genesis 12.
Right.
But this is where I have to push back, and where I think a lot of modern readers hit a wall. Because if God's ultimate goal is to reach this entire scattered, broken globe, his strategy in Genesis 12 seems logically absurd.
How so?
Well, he picks one guy, one elderly nomad in the Middle East named Abraham, and one single family. From a purely logistical standpoint, picking one obscure family to reach the entire planet seems like a terrible plan. Doesn't this also seem inherently exclusionary? Like, why not reveal himself to every culture simultaneously?
It absolutely looks exclusionary if you misunderstand the biblical mechanism of what theologians call election.
Okay, break that down for me.
The text spends significant time clarifying this because it is one of the most misunderstood concepts in Scripture. God's choice? His election of Abraham is never about exclusionary favoritism. It is entirely about missional vocation.
Meaning he has a job to do.
Exactly. When God chooses Abraham, he's not setting up a private VIP club with limited seating. Look at the specific phrasing of the covenant in Genesis 12. God says, "I will bless you and make your name great, so that in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed."
All the families of the earth. So the target was always the global horizon, right from the jump.
Always. The text uses a brilliant contrast to explain the mechanics of this. Election is not meant to be a cul-de-sac.
Okay, a cul-de-sac. Let's unpack that imagery.
Think about what a cul-de-sac is. It's a dead-end street, things flow into it, and they just stop. If you view God's choice as a cul-de-sac, it produces toxic spiritual pride.
Because you think it's all about you.
Exactly. You start believing God chose you because you are inherently better or smarter or more moral than the other nations, but biblical election is a channel.
A channel, like a river channel.
Right. A channel takes water from a source and directs it outward to dry land. God chooses the particular to reach the universal. He zeroes in on one family to create a concentrated conduit of grace that will eventually flood all the fragmented families of Babel.
That reframes everything. And there's a specific linguistic detail the text highlights here that I find so poetic. At Babel, the driving motivation was, let us make a name for ourselves.
Right.
It was a violent seizing of status. But in Genesis 12, God says to Abraham, I will make your name great.
It is a complete subversion of the empire mindset. The builders of Babel tried to grasp greatness through dominance, architecture, and religious manipulation. God hands greatness to Abraham as a free gift.
Wow.
But in God's economy, greatness is intrinsically tied to service. Your name is made great, Not so you can build monuments to yourself, but so you have the entrusted influence to be useful to the rest of the world. Greatness is a tool for blessing others.
Okay, so let's follow this timeline. We have this single family, this channel, and over generations, this family multiplies. They go down into Egypt, they multiply further, and they emerge as an entire nation.
The channel is widening.
Yes, the channel widens, and as they become the nation of Israel, God gives them a highly specific, very public job description. This brings us to Exodus 19.
A pivotal moment.
God tells the newly freed Israelites, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." I want to break down that word priest, because today we hear priest and we think of like a guy in a collar organizing a bake sale. What did priests actually mean in the ancient Near East?
We really have to reconstruct the ancient worldview to understand the gravity of that calling. In the ancient world, a priest was fundamentally a mediator. They stood in the gap.
Okay.
A priest stands before the divine on behalf of the common people, interceding for them. And conversely, the priest stands before the people on behalf of the divine, representing the character and will of the gods.
So it's a two-way street.
Exactly. So when God designates the entire nation of Israel as a kingdom of priests, he is assigning them a corporate geopolitical vocation.
Their whole society has a job.
Right. Their very existence as a society was meant to be a visible, tangible public witness. They were tasked with showing the surrounding pagan empires what the invisible creator is actually like.
I want to try a different analogy here. The text hints at them being a contrast, but I see them almost like a divine beta test.
Oh, I like that.
Or like a pilot program. You have a world dominated by brutal dictatorships, and God sets up this tiny pilot program in the Middle East and says, look at how human society operates when I am the king. Their entire legal code, their justice system, their economic practices, it was all designed to be a living demonstration of God's character.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. And the historical context of when they received this calling explains the specific nature of the pilot program. I mean, think about where they just came from in Exodus 19.
Right, they just left Egypt.
Right. And Egypt was the absolute pinnacle of human empire. It was the ultimate manifestation of the Babel mindset.
Power, dominance.
Absolute power, systematic oppression, forced labor, and the total dominance of the strong over the weak. Pharaoh was considered a living god who claimed absolute authority over human bodies, human labor, and human destinies.
Just a brutal system.
The Egyptian economy was built entirely on the backs of disposable slaves making endless quotas of bricks.
Egypt is the ultimate manual treadmill. Grind until you die to build a pyramid for someone else.
Exactly. So Israel is called out of that nightmare to be what the text calls a holy alternative.
A holy alternative.
They're called to demonstrate to the world that human civilization does not have to be built on exploitation and violence. It can be built on covenant, on mercy, radical justice, and rest.
Let's talk about the mechanics of how their laws actually demonstrated that, because it's fascinating. Take the Sabbath law, for instance.
Yes, perfect example.
We think of Sabbath as just, going to church on Sunday. But in the ancient world, giving your slaves and your livestock a day off every 7 days was economic insanity.
It was absolutely revolutionary. In Egypt, production never stopped. The machine demanded constant output. By mandating a day of complete rest for everyone, even the lowest servant, and the immigrant Israel was loudly declaring, "Our God does not view you as a machine. Your value is not tied to your brick quota."
That's beautiful. Or consider the laws regarding the Jubilee, where debts were canceled and land was returned every 50 years. That prevents the formation of generational, inescapable poverty. It prevents a few wealthy elites from buying up the entire country and turning everyone else into serfs.
Precisely. Their holiness was not about hiding in a remote desert cave to maintain spiritual purity.
It wasn't isolation.
No, their holiness was meant to be a fiercely public, brilliantly attractive display of God's wisdom. The surrounding nations were supposed to look at Israel's economic fairness, their care for the vulnerable, their restorative justice, and say, what kind of God commands a society to function with such beauty and equity?
But, and as the text painstakingly details, there is a profound and tragic irony to the actual history of Israel. The pilot program crashes repeatedly.
It does. It really does. The tragedy of the Old Testament is that Israel constantly suffered from spiritual amnesia.
They forgot the point.
They coveted the privilege of election, but they utterly rejected the burden of witness. They wanted the blessings, the promised land, the military protection, the economic prosperity, but they forgot the nations.
They wanted all the benefits of being God's chosen people without doing the difficult cross-cultural job of being the priestly people to the world.
They took the channel of blessing and dammed it up, turning it right back into a stagnant cul-de-sac.
And the text points out that this isn't just a critique of ancient history. This is a perennial, terrifying temptation for any community of faith today.
Oh, absolutely. It's so relevant.
It is so easy for a group of believers to gradually morph into a private religious country club.
You become obsessed with your own internal maintenance.
Right. You focus entirely on making the sanctuary comfortable, preserving your specific subculture, and protecting your kids from the outside world. You become completely inward-looking, hoarding the blessing, and retreating into spiritual isolation.
And the devastating reality is that when a community does that, it actually forfeits its own core identity. Because as we established at the beginning, the church is created by mission. Without mission, it is just a social club with religious vocabulary. We see a brilliant, visceral illustration of this inward-looking mindset in the biblical story of Jonah.
Oh, Jonah is the perfect case study here.
He really is.
God literally gives him a missional command. Go to Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and preach. And what does Jonah do? He runs in the exact opposite direction. He hops on a boat heading to Tarshish. Why? It wasn't just because he was scared of the Assyrians.
No. The text of Jonah reveals his exact theological motivation later in the story. Jonah hated the Assyrians.
I mean, they were terrible.
They were a brutal, violent, oppressive empire. Jonah wanted God to destroy them. He knew that if he went and preached and they repented, God's nature is to be merciful. Jonah wanted the blessing of God's grace exclusively for Israel. He vehemently opposed sharing it with his enemies.
He is the ultimate cul-de-sac.
He is the embodiment of Israel wanting the cul-de-sac. He would rather die in a literal storm than be a channel of grace to Nineveh.
Wow. But what is so compelling about the narrative of the Old Testament is that despite Israel's constant failure, despite their rebellion, their kings turning corrupt, their society becoming just as oppressive as Egypt, God's vision does not shrink.
That's the amazing part.
He doesn't say, well, the pilot program failed, let's just scrap the project. Through the poets and the prophets, the vision actually explodes outward. The scope gets massively wider.
Yes, the Psalms and the prophetic books completely shatter any lingering assumption that Yahweh is just a local, tribal deity primarily concerned with a small strip of land in the Levant.
Right.
These texts prove that a global, all-encompassing mission was not a New Testament afterthought. It wasn't Plan B. It was baked into the theology from the start.
The text highlights Psalm 67 to prove this. Let's look at the mechanics of this prayer because the phrasing is incredibly intentional. It begins, "May God be gracious to us and bless us and make his face to shine upon us." And honestly, for most of us, we'd put a period right there.
Oh, for sure. Amen. Thank you for the hedge of protection and the financial blessing. See you next week.
Exactly. We deeply prefer prayers that terminate on our own comfort.
We do.
But the psalm refuses to stop there. It pivots on a crucial conjunction. It says, God bless us, that your way may be known on earth, your saving power among all nations. The blessing comes with a that. There is an intrinsic purpose attached to the favor of God.
It is the channel logic manifesting in poetry. God's grace toward his specific people is intended to become the mechanism of public revelation to the nations. And the text uses a specific term to describe the movement in the Old Testament.
It is centripetal.
Wait, centripetal,
Yeah.
like a centrifuge spinning inward.
Yeah.
Break down how a physics term applies to ancient Israelite theology.
Okay, so in physics, centripetal force is directed toward the center of a rotating body.
In missiology, it describes the Old Testament model where the nations are drawn inward toward the center. Israel was not generally commanded to send out waves of traveling missionaries to foreign lands. Instead, their calling was to live as such a distinct, holy, and beautiful society in the center of the world that the surrounding nations would be magnetically drawn inward to them.
Ah, so they were supposed to be the city on a hill.
Yes. Come and see rather than go and tell.
That makes total sense.
And you see this centripetal vision clearly in the prophets. Look at how Isaiah envisions the future. God speaks to the coming servant, the Messiah, and says, "It is too light a thing that you should be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to bring back the preserved of Israel. I will make you as a light for the nations, that my salvation may reach to the end of the earth."
I love that phrase, too light a thing. God is essentially saying, restoring just this one nation is a vastly underambitious project for my servant. It's not a big enough job.
Exactly. The tribal vision is simply too small for the creator of the cosmos.
Yep.
And the prophet Micah echoes this, depicting a future where the mountain of the house of the Lord is established as the highest of mountains, and peoples from many nations stream to it, saying, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, that he may teach us his ways." The horizon of the prophets is undeniably global.
So if you are listening to this right now, I want you to evaluate your own internal posture for a moment. Connect this ancient poetry to your daily commute. When you ask for God's favor, when you pray for safety, for a promotion at work, for peace in your household, or for success in a project, what is the underlying mechanism of that prayer? Are you asking for a cul-de-sac of comfort, a bunker where you can hide from the world? Or are you praying to be a channel? The text argues that when we are blessed, it is specifically so we can be luminous, magnetic reflections of God's character to our neighbors.
That is the ultimate challenge of the Old Testament witness.
It really is.
But as we move forward in the biblical narrative, we reach a massive turning point. You have all these centuries of ancient promises, this weighty priestly calling, these expansive poetic prayers, these sweeping prophetic visions of the nations gathering. And for hundreds of years, the tension builds.
It's all leading somewhere.
Yes. The text demonstrates how all of these historical currents finally collide in a single, unrepeatable historical moment. The mission doesn't remain abstract. It physically enters the timeline.
This brings us to the center of the entire document and really the fulcrum of human history, Jesus Christ. And the mechanics of the mission fundamentally shift here. Jesus doesn't just show up on Earth to deliver a new memo from headquarters.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't just stand on a cloud and shout down a better set of moral instructions. The text argues that he is the mission embodied. The mission takes on human flesh, bone, and blood.
This is the profound doctrine of the Incarnation, and its implications for how we understand the methodology of mission are just staggering. What is vital to understand here is the nature of the boundary that Jesus crosses.
Okay, let's talk about that boundary.
Today, we often talk about cross-cultural mission, right? Crossing oceans, navigating complex language barriers, adapting to new climates.
Sure.
But Jesus crosses the ultimate, infinite boundary: ontological distance.
Ontological distance. Okay, let's translate that for someone listening on their lunch break. What exactly does ontological mean in this context?
Well, ontology is the study of being, of the nature of existence itself.
Okay.
So the ontological distance refers to the absolute infinite gap between the eternal creator, who exists outside of time and space, and finite, fragile, mortal creation.
Wow.
It is the gap between the infinite and the finite. God doesn't just shout across this divide, he crosses it.
Yeah.
He takes on human nature.
The text uses a phrase here that I absolutely love. He does not save from afar.
That is the essence of incarnational mission. He does not sit comfortably in heaven and throw down a rope ladder for us to climb.
Right.
He descends into the mess. He assumes the vulnerability of a human infant. He enters grinding poverty. He lives his entire earthly life under the crushing, oppressive thumb of the Roman Empire.
He experiences the reality of it.
He experiences genuine physical fatigue, hunger, thirst, betrayal, and grief. He touches people suffering from leprosy, rendering himself ceremonially unclean in the eyes of the religious elite. He shares meals with tax collectors and outcasts, the people polite society had utterly discarded.
Which teaches us something incredibly confronting about what true mission actually requires. It demands proximity.
Yes, proximity.
It requires presence. You cannot truly love a broken world by remote control. You cannot just launch theological truths at people from a safe distance, from behind the gated walls of your comfortable life.
Incarnational mission dictates that you must get close enough to the brokenness to understand the pain. You must share the condition, the struggles, and the environment of the people you are called to serve. A mission without proximity is really just philanthropy. It might alleviate temporary needs, but it doesn't offer true reconciliation.
And here is the hard truth about that. Proximity is dangerous.
It is very dangerous.
Getting close to pain means you are going to get hurt. Which leads us directly to the climax and the most costly aspect of Jesus' mission, the cross. The text makes a razor-sharp point here that pushes back against a lot of superficial theology. It states that the cross was not an interruption of Jesus' mission.
It is vital to grasp this. It's not as if things were going perfectly. He was preaching brilliant sermons, healing the sick, gathering massive crowds, and then, tragically, the political situation just got out of hand and he was accidentally crucified.
Like a mistake.
Right. The text insists that the cross is the center of the mission. It was the intentional destination all along.
The text describes his mission as cruciform. We probably need an ELI 5 on that word, too.
Yeah, so cruciform simply means shaped like a cross. When theologians say Jesus' mission was cruciform, they mean that the very mechanism of his victory was suffering and self-sacrifice. On the cross, he absorbs the judgment of human sin, he disarms the demonic powers of darkness, and he reconciles rebellious enemies to God.
And I want to pause here because I think we need to seriously push back on our own modern sensibilities regarding this. Think about the Roman context of crucifixion. The Romans used the cross as a massive, violent public relations tool.
It was terrorism, essentially.
Exactly. It was designed to say, this is what happens when you challenge the empire. We will strip you of your dignity, torture you, and make a public spectacle of your defeat. And Jesus takes the empire's ultimate weapon of terror and uses it as the very instrument to defeat evil. He completely subverts the mechanism of power.
He defeats power not with greater coercive violence, but with suffering love.
And the challenge for us today is severe. In modern culture, even in ministry and nonprofit spaces, there is a massive hunger for successful, comfortable service. We want influence.
We want a platform.
Yes. We want large platforms. We want to be culturally relevant, applauded by our peers, and financially secure. But if the mission we are joining is genuinely cruciform, if its DNA is shaped by the cross, it means it advances fundamentally through sacrifice. It advances through self-giving, not self-protection. It advances through profound humility, not cultural domination or political power.
A triumphalist mission, one that relies on human prestige, wealth, and power, will inevitably collapse the moment significant hardship or persecution arises. But a cruciform mission inherently expects hardship because the master himself suffered. The servant is not greater than the master.
But, and this is the crucial pivot, the story does not terminate at the cross. Friday is dark, but Sunday morning changes the cosmos.
Absolutely. The resurrection is the ultimate vindication of the entire mission. The empty tomb proves that Christ's cruciform method of self-giving love is actually the strongest, most enduring force in the universe.
Death doesn't win.
Death does not get the final word. Evil exhausts itself on Jesus, and Jesus rises victorious. And if we look at the mechanics of the text, the resurrection is the direct, necessary setup for the Great Commission in Matthew 28.
This is the famous passage. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. But the text points out that we often skip the first half of the sentence.
We do, to our own detriment. Look at what precedes the command to go. Jesus states, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. This is the foundational mechanism of mission.
So he establishes his authority first.
Yes. The command to go into all the world is not a desperate plea from a dying martyr hoping his followers will just keep his memory alive. It is the royal authoritative decree of a victorious enthroned king.
Authority precedes sending. This is so incredibly practical. Let's translate this to the daily reality of someone listening right now. When you are terrified to talk to your neighbor about your faith, or when you feel completely inadequate stepping into a difficult volunteer role in your city, the solution isn't to muster up more self-confidence.
No, it's not about hype.
You don't need to dig deeper into your own emotional reserves. You just need to remember who is actually in charge of the outcome. The church doesn't go into the world because it is confident in its own persuasive abilities or sociological strategies.
It goes because Christ reigns over the cosmos.
Yes. The outcome is backed by infinite authority.
The mission is unavoidable because his lordship is undeniable.
But even with this ultimate cosmic authority backing them up, Jesus does something in the text that feels incredibly counterintuitive. He gives them the Great Commission, but then at the beginning of the book of Acts, he essentially says, don't leave yet, wait.
Right.
They had the mandate, but they lacked the mechanism to execute it.
This brings us to a vital question about the engine that drives this mission. Look at Acts 1:8. Jesus says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses. The text emphasizes the specific order of operations here.
What's the order?
Power comes first, witness comes second. They are explicitly told to wait in Jerusalem, to receive the Spirit, and only then to go.
Because attempting to execute God's mission without God's Spirit leads us right back to the beginning of this deep dive.
Straight back to the treadmill.
It leads straight to the 2 a.m. spreadsheet burnout. It is exhausting human-powered activism. You might be able to manufacture a crowd with good marketing, you might build a successful religious organization, but it will be brittle. It will lack genuine spiritual life, and eventually, the people running the machine will collapse from fatigue.
A spiritless mission trusts entirely in structures, budgets, and pragmatic techniques. A spirit-filled mission, however, is characterized by radical dependence, unceasing prayer, and supernatural courage.
And we see that shift immediately.
Yes, when the Spirit descends at Pentecost, the transformation is immediate. These previously terrified, hiding disciples are suddenly propelled into the streets, empowered to speak boldly across deep cultural and linguistic barriers.
It's a complete 180.
And in Acts 1.8, Jesus gives them the specific geographic map for how this explosion of witness is going to spread.
Right. He says they will be his witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth.
Let's deeply analyze that specific order, because it is not merely a random travel itinerary. It is a profound theological map.
It starts with Jerusalem, the immediate context, the home base.
Yes, you must begin by bearing witness right where you are among the people who know your history, who see your daily habits, and who can verify the authenticity of your life.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then it moves to Judea, the surrounding culturally familiar region. But then it hits a massive roadblock, Samaria.
Samaria is definitely the curveball in the itinerary. We need to unpack the history here because to a modern reader, Samaria just sounds like, the next town over.
Yeah, like crossing state lines.
Right. But for a first-century Jew, going to Samaria was not a casual road trip.
Not at all. The hostility between Jews and Samaritans was ancient, deep, and incredibly bitter. It was rooted in centuries of ethnic intermarriage during the Assyrian exile and profound theological disputes over where the true temple should be located.
So there's religious and ethnic tension?
It was a relationship defined by prejudice, religious contempt, and complete social avoidance. A righteous first-century Jew would literally walk miles out of their way, crossing the Jordan River twice, just to avoid setting foot on Samaritan soil.
Wow. So Jesus is telling them they cannot skip the people they culturally despise.
He's aiming right at their prejudice.
I picture this map like tossing a heavy stone into a still pond.
Okay, I like that visual.
The stone drops in Jerusalem, and the ripples must naturally start exactly where the stone drops. You can't magically skip the ripples to the far shore. You cannot claim to care passionately about the ends of the earth while simultaneously ignoring your own neighborhood, your own estranged family members, or your own city.
Right.
And crucially, you cannot skip Samaria. The ripple of grace must pass directly through the zone of your deepest discomfort and historical prejudice to get to the ends of the earth.
That is a brilliant visualization. And if we look at the narrative of Acts, what actually provides the kinetic energy to force those ripples outward? What propels the early church out of their comfortable, successful rhythm in Jerusalem?
This is one of the most paradoxical and challenging elements in the text. It's persecution.
Yeah.
God uses tragedy as propulsion.
In Acts chapter 8, the martyrdom of Stephen triggers a massive, violent wave of persecution against the church. The believers are terrified, their lives are upended, and they are scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria.
They're essentially refugees.
Exactly. But the text emphasizes a stunning reversal. This scattering is the very mechanism of sending.
Wow.
What appears to be an absolute catastrophe, the destruction of their community center, the loss of their homes, actually forces the church out of its comfort zone and causes the gospel to multiply exponentially. The text says, "Now those who were scattered went about preaching the word."
The disruption fulfills the map. The scattering is the sending. And as this gospel ripple moves further outward, as it finally leaves the familiar Jewish context and collides with the vast, pluralistic Greco-Roman world, it encounters radically different cultures. Which brings us to a very messy, highly complex, and often painful part of mission history.
It is incredibly complex.
Because how does a messenger carry this truth into a foreign culture without either destroying the local culture with dominance or diluting the truth of the message to make it palatable?
This requires us to tackle the historical reality with absolute honesty. The history of cross-cultural missions is undeniably mixed. It contains stories of luminous, breathtaking sacrifice, and it also contains stories of tragic, devastating failure.
Yeah.
The source document we are analyzing addresses this directly, warning against two massive historical errors: cultural imperialism and cultural relativism.
Let's define these objectively based on the text, because these are heavily loaded terms today. What exactly does the text mean by cultural imperialism in the context of missiology?
So, cultural imperialism occurs when a messenger fundamentally confuses the core gospel with their own native civilization.
Okay.
It is the assumption That in order for someone to become a genuine Christian, they must also adopt the messenger's cultural habits, clothing styles, musical preferences, and political structures.
Basically making them look just like you.
Exactly. Historically, we saw this disastrously play out during the eras of European colonialism, where bringing civilization and bringing Christ were tragically conflated. It is a form of dominance. It demands that the receiver abandon their cultural identity to adopt yours.
Which is incredibly damaging because the gospel does not belong to the West. It doesn't belong at the East or to any specific nation or empire. It transcends them all.
Exactly. However, the text warns that the pendulum can easily swing too far in the opposite direction, resulting in cultural relativism.
What is the mechanism of that error? Let's unpack that.
Cultural relativism happens when a messenger, often driven by a well-intentioned desire to be polite, to be accepted, or to avoid causing offense, fundamentally dilutes the truth of the gospel.
They water it down.
They strip away the exclusive demands of Christ. They remove the elements of the message that confront local sin or call for repentance. They adapt the message so thoroughly to the host culture that it loses its distinctiveness, its transformative power, and its authority.
It just blends in.
It becomes merely a mirror reflecting whatever the host culture already believes.
So it's a tightrope. On one side, you crush the culture with your own arrogance. On the other side, you dissolve the gospel into meaninglessness. How did the early church navigate this? What is the model the text suggests?
The text points heavily to the Apostle Paul as the master class in navigating this tension. Paul articulated a model of becoming all things to all people, so that by all possible means he might save some. The key distinction is this: Paul rigorously adapted his approach, but he never altered the content of the gospel.
Okay, so he contextualized the delivery method.
Precisely. If Paul was speaking in a Jewish synagogue in Antioch, he reasoned with them from the Hebrew scriptures and the history of Israel.
Because that's what they knew.
Right. But when he was standing before the Greek philosophers at the Areopagus in Athens, men who didn't know or care about Moses, he didn't start with the Exodus. He started by quoting their own pagan poets and observing their own altars.
That is brilliant.
The text summarizes the principle beautifully. Contextualization is absolutely necessary. Doctrinal dilution is forbidden. The gospel is universally translatable. It is robust enough to enter and take root in any culture, challenging its idols while affirming its beauty.
It enters the host culture incarnationally, just as Jesus entered humanity.
Exactly.
And you know what deeply encourages me when reading the book of Acts in this text? When you look at how this message actually expanded across the Roman Empire, the heavy lifting wasn't just done by the famous named apostles.
No, not at all.
It wasn't just Peter and Paul standing on massive marble stages giving eloquent speeches.
The sociological expansion of the early church was overwhelmingly driven by completely unnamed, profoundly ordinary beliefs.
Herb keepers, bakers, widows,
Yeah.
traveling merchants, slaves, people who were forced to flee persecution and simply took their faith with them, sharing it organically within the normal rhythms of their daily lives. They were talking about the resurrection while they were making tents in Corinth or buying bread in the marketplace in Ephesus or taking care of children.
The text underscores a vital truth here. The mission of God is not reserved for a specialized elite class of religious professionals with theological degrees.
It's not just for the pastors.
No, it is the fundamental calling of the entire sent community.
Let me speak directly to you, the listener, right now. This is where the theology hits the pavement. You do not need a massive social media platform to be an active participant in this story.
You really don't.
You don't need eloquence, you don't need a seminary education, and you don't even necessarily need a passport. You are already embedded in the Missio Dei. Your office cubicle, the break room at your factory, your kitchen table, the hallway in your apartment building, the sidelines of your kid's soccer game. These are active, vibrant mission fields.
That is exactly where the mission happens.
The quiet way you do your work with integrity, the way you show radical hospitality to a lonely neighbor, the way you forgive people who wrong you, the way you advocate for the vulnerable in your local community. That is the mission of God happening in real time.
Ordinary daily faithfulness is the primary vehicle for God's extraordinary cosmic mission.
So we have traced this massive river from its headwaters in the heart of the Trinity. We watched it flow through the channel of Abraham, through the pilot program of Israel, culminating in the incarnational cruciform life of Jesus, and bursting outward through the spirit-empowered ordinary early church. The final question we have to ask is, where is all this effort actually leading? What is the final destination of the mission of God?
A mission is ultimately defined by its destination, right?
Mhm.
If you do not know the telos, the end goal, you will inevitably lose your way.
So where does the text say we're going?
The text takes us to the very end of the biblical canon, to the breathtaking visions in the book of Revelation, specifically Revelation chapter 7, verse 9.
Okay, what does it say?
The end point of human history is described as a great multitude that no one could number, gathered from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb.
I get incredibly excited about this passage because of what is explicitly not there.
What do you mean?
Well, the end of the world, the culmination of God's redemptive plan, does not feature a homogenized, erased humanity. Everyone isn't wearing the exact same uniform, stripped of their identity, speaking one monolithic, universal language.
The curse of Babel is not reversed by enforcing uniformity.
Exactly. The unique cultural distinctives, the varied languages, the different tribes, they are preserved, redeemed, and brought directly into the eternal presence of God. But the hostility of Babel is gone.
The prejudice is gone.
The division is healed. It is not a cosmic melting pot that dissolves who you are. It is a stunning, infinitely complex mosaic. It is unity achieved through radical reconciliation, not forced uniformity. God values the diverse tapestry of human culture so much that he preserves it for eternity.
And we must notice what this incredibly diverse, healed multitude is actually doing. They are worshiping.
Okay.
The text makes a definitive, foundational statement. Mission exists because worship doesn't.
Let that sink in for a second. Mission exists because worship doesn't.
The ultimate driving goal of the mission is not merely human rescue, as unimaginably vital and beautiful as that rescue is. The ultimate supreme goal is the glory of God.
Wow.
The nations are gathered, reconciled, and healed so that the Lamb who was slain receives the full reward of his suffering. God's glory is the engine, and God's glory is the destination.
And I want to make sure we don't picture this as just some ethereal, disembodied spiritual worship floating on clouds playing harps. The text brings up another crucial vision from Revelation 22. In the vision of the New Jerusalem heaven coming down to earth, John sees the river of the water of life, and on either side of the river is the tree of life. And the text says, the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. The gospel does not abandon physical creation, it completely renews it. God isn't just saving invisible souls and tossing the physical earth into an incinerator.
No, it's a new heaven and a new earth.
He is addressing and ultimately healing spiritual, cultural, relational, and even ecological brokenness. The nations are fully healed.
Which brings us back to the psychological reality of the believer today. How does knowing the ending of this massive narrative change our present reality? How does it affect that person sitting at the kitchen table at 2 a.m. with their spreadsheet?
Right, our friend from the beginning of the deep dive.
It changes everything because the outcome is entirely irreversibly secure. The vision of Revelation is not a hopeful guess about how things might turn out if we work hard enough. It is a guaranteed future reality.
It's done.
Because of that guarantee, the church is freed from the crushing anxiety of having to manufacture the final results.
We do not have to save the world.
No, Christ has already secured the definitive victory. We are simply called to joyful, simple, day-by-day faithfulness, knowing with absolute certainty that the Lord of the harvest guarantees the harvest will come in.
Okay, let's synthesize this incredible, sprawling journey we've been on today. We began by asking the paradigm-shifting question, whose mission are we actually joining?
And the resounding answer from the text is that mission is not a desperate church program. It is the very heartbeat of the triune God.
We saw it in God calling Abraham to be a channel of blessing to a fractured world rather than a cul-de-sac. We saw it in Israel's calling to be a public, holy alternative, a beta test, contrasting the oppressive empires of the world.
We saw it vividly in the incarnation of Christ, who crossed the infinite ontological boundary to bring the kingdom near through the cruciform sacrifice of the cross and the undeniable authority of the empty tomb.
And we saw it in the Holy Spirit propelling ordinary, unnamed people outward, like ripples in a pond, carrying this unstoppable river of grace toward a beautifully diverse, fully healed, worshiping world.
It is the grand unifying narrative of Scripture, and the staggering truth is that we are invited to actively participate in it.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over on your own, something we touched on during the book of Acts. But I want you to apply it directly to the immediate circumstances of your life.
This is so important.
Think about the specific scattering moments you have experienced. We almost always view painful disruptions, a forced relocation to a new city, an unexpected and devastating job loss, a sudden illness that changes your daily routine, or the collapse of a comfortable social circle. We view these entirely as massive setbacks.
They feel like the treadmill is broken and we have failed.
But what if, just like the early church in Acts chapter 8, your personal disruption is not a failure? What if it isn't a tragic accident of geography or economics? What if the exact thing that scattered you, the very hardship that shattered your comfort and routine, is actually the Holy Spirit's propulsion? What if God is actively using that disruption to place you in a brand new Samaria? A new office environment, a new neighborhood, a new circle of people who are struggling and far from God, where you are now perfectly positioned to be a quiet, ordinary, faithful witness for the King.
That paradigm shift changes the way you view every single hardship and transition. If the mission belongs to God, you are never merely scattered, you are always sent.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive. We hope this exploration frees you from the exhausting treadmill of self-reliance and invites you to step joyfully into the roaring river of God's grace. We encourage you to look at your everyday life, your mundane work, your family dynamics, your neighborhood interactions as active, vital participation in the unstoppable, eternal movement of God. Until next time.